My name is Randy, and I live in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains of Vermont. It's a beautiful scenery with hundreds of acres of land that stretched across the state. This happened in the fall of 2019. During this time, I owned a farm in a small town called Woodstock. It's a town not many people in my state know about, as it's tucked away deep into the rural mountains. Those who have been to Woodstock know exactly what I'm talking about. I sold the farm a few years ago, but when I did own it, I mainly raised cattle and grew vegetables as a business opportunity. I owned several livestock, mostly cows that were like family to me. If I can remember correctly, it was the middle of November, and I had been on my farm with my brother Sean, who I hadn't seen in years. Sean had visited so we could go on our hunting trip we had planned, and with it being deer season, we had to get with the program. Sean arrived at the farm late that night, bringing along his hunting gear to prepare for our trip in the morning. We caught up for a bit, and after drinking some booze by the fire, we called it a night. Sean went to bed first, and while it was late, I wasn't tired for some reason. Therefore, I decided to step out on the front porch to have a cigarette and hopefully calm my mind to help me fall asleep. There I was, on my porch, sitting on my rocking chair when I hear a weird noise coming from the side of the house. At first, I had no idea what to make of it, but I could only describe it as someone scraping wood. My first thought was that it was a tree branch brushing up against the house. Out of curiosity, I get out of my chair with my flashlight and turn the corner of the house. I was only able to catch a glimpse of it, but my flashlight revealed what I could only describe as a massive arm with reddish hair and claws. I only saw this for about a second before whatever it was took off running in the other direction before screaming out to Sean. He comes out of the house worried and asks me what I was yelling about. I shine my flashlight at the wood and see large gashes carved into the side of the house. He lets out a "what the hell?" and I told him that I had seen a bear clawing at the house. My brother and I go inside to grab our hunting rifles to scan the tree line for this bear. Sean and I decided to split up to search the barn. I went right while he went left and to holler if he saw it. After a while of searching the property, we went up at the house but still found no sign of this bear. We both agreed that the bear was probably gone by now and that we should focus on getting some rest for the next day. Ultimately, we decided that the best course of action would be to leave them alone. Bears are common in rural Vermont and don't like to be bothered. With that, we got some shut-eye for a good hour or so before waking up to the sound of cattle going haywire. This obviously set off alarms, and within seconds we were both out the door with our guns in hand. Sean is a lot younger than me, so he ran off toward the barn much faster than I did. I see him run towards the barn, disappearing into the night before hearing a single gunshot and something making this awful noise. I run up to Sean, and he's just standing there holding his rifle staring into the trees. When I ask him if he got the bear, he just looks at me with these wild eyes and tells me to get inside. We head back towards the house and step inside, where I ask Sean once again if he shot the bear. There was a long pause before he stares at me and says something in a trembling voice that sent a chill down my spine. No, and that wasn't a bear. I got goosebumps just hearing those words come out of his mouth and ask him what it was. However, he said that he didn't know and that all he saw was this very tall gorilla-shaped figure with very long fur and a horrible smell. The most shocking part he described was its eyes. They were blazing yellow. Now, I've spent my life in these woods for over a decade, and not once have I heard anything about a creature like this. It wasn't until then when I looked at the claw marks on the house and saw it appeared to only have 3 claws. That's when it hit me. What kind of bear walks on its hind legs and has 3 claws? Sean recommended we report it to the local sheriff. Even though there was a big chance they probably wouldn't have believed us, I still thought it was a good idea. We had gone to the station at 3 a.m. to inform them what we saw and tried our best to give an accurate description. After giving our description, one of the officers invited us into his office and told us that they've seen similar reports. This animal, or whatever it was, is known to be very territorial and will act aggressive if provoked or threatened. According to other reports, it was claimed that this creature preyed on both pets and livestock. One woman even claimed that she had seen this creature fighting 2 adult bears, though that was never to have been confirmed. We both stayed at a nearby motel that night and had to postpone our hunting trip, obviously. It was the middle of October in northeastern Georgia, and that fresh autumn breeze was starting to set in. It was my fiancé Jason and I's first fall into buying our new home, and with Halloween upon us, we knew we had to decorate the house. Fall in our state is nothing you've ever seen before. There was just something about the autumn leaves falling to the ground that just made it feel lively. My parents had given us a bunch of old Halloween decorations that they no longer wanted. My dad was a huge Halloween fanatic and would turn the house into a cemetery. However, he was getting to that age where he didn't have the energy to do it anymore, and so he decided to pass it along to us. One day, my fiancé and I got the house decorated with all of the props we got from my parents. It was around 5 in the afternoon, and the sun was beginning to set when I told my fiancé that we should call it a day. As we were wrapping up, we see a man we had never seen before walking his dog on the sidewalk when he takes notice of our Halloween decorations. He was an older man, maybe mid-50s with long gray hair and a salt and pepper beard. He mutters out a comment about our decorations and how he too loved Halloween. I remember saying something about how we loved it too and that it was a really fun time of year. He stayed silent for a minute as he watched us finish setting up the last of the decorations for the day. There was a long and awkward pause when I break the silence, asking if he lived in the neighborhood. He lets out a firm yeah while pointing down the street. Based on that, I had assumed he lived down the road, and I just smile at him as a friendly gesture. After a minute, he looks ahead and says, "You folks have a nice night now." We thank him, and with that, he went on his merry way. Now, we're not one to judge, but we got a weird vibe off him. He wore stained clothes and honestly appeared homeless. Seeing as we lived in a generally wealthier area of town, you just wouldn't expect to see someone walking around like that. Most people who live around here are presentable when going out. However, as I said, I don't want to judge someone from their appearance and assumed it could have been a relative or something. Jason and I went back inside the house to cook dinner as it was getting late and we were both pretty hungry. I was on the kitchen table on my laptop doing something for work when Jason says the guy from earlier is looking into our window. I turn around and sure enough, there he was in our front yard looking at us through our window. He gives us a wave and I go over to the door and ask him if there's anything we could help him with. He says that we have a lovely home and that it reminded him of his mother's house. I thanked him and told him to have a nice night, hoping to get the hint to leave us alone. Unfortunately, he didn't seem to get the message as he kept on standing in our yard but keeping a distance. While it was really weird, we didn't want to be rude and just sort of ignored him by closing the blinds. That seemed to have done the trick, as an hour later he was nowhere in sight. We had went to bed early that night as we both had to get ready for work the next day. Fast forward a few hours later, we were awoke to a notification on our phones from Ring, telling us that there was someone at the door. Jason opens the app to view the live feed from our doorbell, and what we saw was bone-chilling. The doorbell cam revealed the same man from earlier trying to pick the lock to the front door. Jason was furious this time and put on his slides and ran downstairs to the front. I hear him tell the man in this angered tone to go the hell away and that he was calling the police. This made him bolt down the road while my fiancée called the cops. He didn't get very far, as police were able to find him relatively fast. Law enforcement in this area was very responsive and didn't handle break-ins lightly. They of course arrested him and he was taken in for questioning. Turns out, he didn't live in this neighborhood at all and actually stayed at a nearby shelter. Either way, he was arrested but was released a few months later. We had gotten a restraining order against him and that if he was within 500 feet of us, he would be arrested again. And that dog he was with? That dog was actually stolen from a resident 2 towns over and was later returned. We haven't seen him since, and I hope it stays that way. I just hope he's getting the proper help he needs. This took place in October of 2012 when I was 16 years old. For context, I'm a female. I stand 5 foot and am certainly petite. I mention this as this will be important in the story later on. I had gone to visit my grandparents that lived in this really cute cottage in a small town of North Carolina. The name of the town won't be mentioned as I don't want this incident spreading around that town. If I could remember correctly, it was a Friday night and my grandparents had gone out shopping for Halloween decorations. While they never celebrated Halloween, they did enjoy the vibe of it and would commonly give out candy to trick-or-treaters. For some reason, I didn't want to go with them and told them I'd stay here to play on my DS. Back then, the DS was one of the best toys of the year and everyone and their grandma had one. So they leave and I have the house to myself and try to make the best of it as I'm almost never home alone. At around 8 p.m., I'm playing on my DS as usual when I get a knock at the door. Assuming it was probably my grandparents back from their errands, I rushed to the door and opened it, but instead saw some guy. He looked normal, although a bit nervous, and asked me if my parents were home and that he was here to fix the water heater. I stupidly said that I was alone, and he gives me this wicked smile that sent chills down my spine. I then tell him that he could come back when they were here, and he then puts his foot in the door saying that he could just do it now. At this point, I was clearly uncomfortable, and I'm pretty sure he noticed that I was. Being only 16, I knew what was happening, but I couldn't resist him even if I tried. Like I said, I'm petite, so I wasn't just gonna push him away. However, the more I tried to resist him, the more angry he got, as he wasn't taking no for an answer. Now, I'm not one to be rude, but I was intimidated by him, as not only did he appear to be angry, but he was also huge. Not knowing what to do, I was about to run inside the house, but that's when I see a car pull in. It was my grandparents, and my grandpa immediately took notice as to what was going on. He steps out of the car and yells at the man to leave or he won't hesitate to blow his brains out. I see this man bolt away from the house down the road, disappearing into the night. After that, I remember them calling the sheriff, but I'm not sure if he ever got caught. The crime rate was very low in this town, so for something like this to happen was extremely rare. I thank my grandparents for arriving when they did. If they had arrived even a minute later, God only knows if I'd even be writing this or not.